welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free and the home of the brave, on the beautiful August the 24th, 2020. Rondo Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, another depressing day in America. You know, you wake up, you turn on the news, you see the police shooting another unarmed black man in front of his family up in Wisconsin. You know, you think this stuff one day will come to an end, but it just seems to have legs every time you turn around.
Yeah,
I also want to thank our frontline responders, Charlton, our nurses, doctors, our first responders, the marvelous job that they're doing against COVID-19. Even though we've had 177,000 deaths in America, the president doesn't give a damn. Keep going strong.
Gotta keep going strong. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. And I really want to say it's also available. If there's just so much smoke in the air, I almost gagged a little bit, so I apologize, but I'm just being real. It's hard to breathe here in Northern California, but I do want to say all around the world, just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing from 3,000 miles away, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV, or you'll be sitting there looking at a still picture. Man, not only is pausing necessary, but I have no idea how people smoke. Just breathing that garbage in makes it even just a challenge. But I do want to say, I know if we're challenged, our veterans are challenged. I love giving out our Veterans Crisis Hotline. They really are experienced helping veterans and their loved ones get help. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Charlton, our veterans need all the help they can get every day from this country and every American citizen. We lose some 22 a day to suicide in America. Many of these veterans, Charlton, rely on the Postal Service to get their medication and their mail and their retirement check.
Yeah.
And yet our Postal Service has been cut back by the president, and many of these veterans, Charlton, are losing their psychological medications, not getting them on time, and that drives even more veterans to suicide. I know everybody thinks that they have problems, and our veterans have great problems, but they sacrifice their lives and their sanity, Charlton, to protect our sovereignty of this country, and we need to do the same. Our administration needs to do the same. I know we give out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, because these veterans deserve all the help they can get. Many of them are destitute economically, socially, and physically. So anything that an American citizen can do to help out an American veteran, please don't ever hesitate. But never hesitate giving out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number.
Very well said. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. You can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can get some help. Also, very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, DirecTV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants and the Say Hey Kid. When you reach out to them, just tell them Big C sent you. Our goal is simple: recruit 100 real estate brokers, put their property listings on TV just like McDonald's does it. Car dealerships do it, sports teams do it. Watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. And help is right around the corner. So I really appreciate a lot of good things that are happening in the world of sports. I know we have, I just wanted to give it, because I heard about that, what happened. You know, the Milwaukee Bucks are doing their thing in the playoffs. And then going back to Wisconsin, there was a tragic shooting of a man that was walking away from law enforcement, didn't have a gun, didn't have a knife, wasn't threatening. He was just, from what I understand, walking back to go get his children after trying to break up a fight. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, no, Charlton, he had his 3 children in the car with him, his young boys, all of them under the age of 10. He had just picked them up from a birthday party, taking them back home. And for some reason, the police were called on some domestic violence procedure that was going on, Charlton. The police had tased this man, Charlton. He was walking away, and he was unarmed. They said he had a knife in his hands, even though he pulled up his pants with both hands, Charlton, and all he had was his keys in his hand. They call it a knife. But he was in his car, and the police officer grabs the back of his shirt and shoots him 7 times in the back, something that was totally unwarranted.
Yeah.
And they're always going to say, well, we have to investigate, we have to see all the facts. I've seen 3 different video angles of it, Charlton. And this is attempted murder by the police. He's in intensive care at ICU still. He's still alive. But to shoot a man 7 times in the back at point-blank range, it's not justified. I don't care who you are. What's so amazing about it, Charlton, is that when the Internet sends out videos, and my daughter showed me another video, it was a white gentleman, Charlton, doing the same thing. But the police tased him, and he attacked the police. The police took off and ran. They let him live, Charlton. He took off and ran. There were 3 white police officers standing there. Eventually, he got in the police car and drove away. A white guy, Charlton, was allowed to live after assaulting the police. A black man was shot 7 times in the back by these same type of white police officers, Charlton. 7 times unarmed in the back, in front of his children, in front of family members, because they said he was threatening while he was walking away. He made no aggressive move towards the police officer, Charlton. He had his hands down, getting in his car. They decided to shoot him 7 times in the back. I watched the white guy attack the police officer after being tased, Charlton. They ran from the white guy, and he took their car and drove away. When we talk about justice and Black Lives Matter in America, Charlton, this is what has everybody so pissed off about what's going on. The administration won't address this, Charlton. Law enforcement and the senators will not address this in this country. Black lives don't matter to these white people.
Well, I disagree with you when you say the White House won't address it.
When you shoot a guy in the back 7 times as a white person, you saying that Black lives matter to you. You can't lump everybody into the same thing. When I say white people, if you're not a bad white person and you're not accepting of that type of action, as we see the white marches that have been white marching since George Floyd's death, some 80 days, Charlton, those are good people. But when I say bad people, it's like saying bad cops. You don't say all cops are bad, you say 5%. So if it's 5% of bad white people in society, Charlton, it's 5%. If it's 50% of bad white people in society, it's 50% of white people. But your agreement and my agreement, they may be disagreeable. But I'm going by what the eye test is.
Yeah. Well, can you still hear me, Big C? I think we dropped your mic a little bit. Are you still there? I think we have a little bit of trouble with your microphone. We'll try to clear it up and get right back in just a second. Okay, Big C, I think we have you back on the phone now. Sorry about the static in the line that we were having. But as I was saying, I disagree when you said that the White House has refused to address this situation, because Donald Trump did say when you arrest them, rough them up, and he was standing in front of police officers when he said it. And so they understood the dog whistle. Just a lot of people don't understand what he meant. I do. My heart goes out for the young men, especially his children, to have. That's so horrific to have that happen. We are having, ironically, we're having the Republican National Convention that kicked off today in Charlotte Convention Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. I think it's the 3rd location that the event was moved to. It was moved twice due to restrictions resulting from the coronavirus pandemic of all things. But when POTUS said rough them up, and he got a standing ovation from law enforcement, they understood the message. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, he was talking about people of color, Charlton. He was telling the white people to rough up people of color like you used to do back in the 50s and 60s and have autonomy in doing it. That there was no repercussions, and we still see no repercussions, Charlton. Breonna Taylor shot in her bed in St. Louis 4 or 5 months ago, Charlton. There's been no disciplinary action taken on those police officers. And when we see this incident that happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin yesterday, a young man walking away with his children, he's put his children in the car. And then you're going to decide to shoot him in the back 7 times? Once wasn't enough, so you're going to damn near empty your gun saying that he was a threat to you? That's what you're saying, that he was a threat with his back turned, getting in his car. And yet, Charlton, when you look on the internet, there's a video that'll pop up right behind it of a white guy.
Yeah.
Where the police shot him with a taser, and he turned and assaulted the police officer. The police officer dropped his gun and ran.
Yeah.
There were two other officers right there. He gets in the police car and drives away. Neither one of them fired one round at this guy, Charlton. Not one round. But yet they felt, because it was a black guy, that this was like you wanted to get out some anger, that you were embarrassed by this black guy not adhering to your order, walking away. So you were going to make him pay the ultimate price in your mind for disrespecting you. You're going to kill him.
Yeah, I know it's been going on since the middle passes Big C, and we got to just use the law as much as we can. Tonight, speaking...
They are the law, Charlton.
Yeah.
When the law shows up and kills you, what do you mean by using the law? When the law shows up and kills you, the guy is designated to serve and protect. You know, they serve and protect the white community. We got to figure out how to survive in the black community.
Well,
that's the difference between serve and protect.
Yeah, when I was saying the law, we have a court of law, and we've seen things go good and bad when it comes to that. But that's the only solution that I can see of. We got to use the law, as horrible as it is. Tonight,
now,
ironically,
how many cases have you seen thrown out against white police officers when they've killed a black person or beaten a black person, Charlton? How many cases you've seen just in the last 10 years? Think about the last 5 years, even less. I mean, we can go up and down the list. You can put together a newspaper, Charlton, on that alone.
So would you say, what's your solution? Just give up or use the law as much as possible?
I mean, show me where the law is working. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying give up on the law, but show me where the law is working. You know, there's a thing called justice, and then there's a thing called just us. That's what it is. When you go in there, it's always the black guy had to have done something, otherwise they wouldn't have killed him. As many times as we've seen it on television in the past several months, of black people losing their lives, being assaulted by police officers, and people are saying, well, they had to have done something that wasn't on tape. Look at the protest that's been going on in America, Charlton. It's been led by white population for the past several months since George Floyd's killing.
Well,
we don't see police officers going out there just killing people because they're white. They got to look at somebody who looks like them. But when we see these white officers see a black person that doesn't look like it, there was a shooting in Atlanta about 2 months ago where they shot a guy who was running away, also shot him in the back. So that's become the modus operandi. Shoot him in the back. They're being very offensive, you know, being very intimidating because he's got his back turned towards me.
Well, I'll just ask you again, what's your solution?
What's my solution, Charlton? If it was looked at from the other perspective, you know, I think about Kelly Loeffler said it should be unlawful for black people to carry guns in a demonstration situation where we saw the Michigan Capitol surrounded by white militia, Charlton. You know, and they said that was okay. It's okay for white people to carry guns. But how would society look at it if blacks were to start turning guns on white? And I'm not advocating violence. I don't even advocate violence from the police, Charlton. I have many friends in the police department. But when I see these situations, it just pisses me off. I've seen it too much.
Yeah, I understand, because the only solution that I see we have is have lawyers that will prosecute those cases, and then we got to put it in the hands of law enforcement. But that's nothing I can really understand right now. I got to process it more. But in talking to law enforcement, the good officers hate it too, but they got to be the ones to come to the solution.
But they don't turn on the bad officers. We keep hearing that. Good officers hate bad officers, but they're not going to turn them in. It's the Blue Shield thing, Charlton. A murderer is a murderer. You know, but when you kill a guy for picking up his children, Charlton, how much more heinous can that get in society? Think about the scarring on these 3 young boys that's going to be there the rest of their lives, especially the 8-year-old that was having his birthday party. He's going to always remember on every birthday that his dad was shot 7 times by the police.
Well, ironically, in tonight's, again, I still go back to Donald Trump said when you arrest them, rough them up. And people who do that, they understood what he was talking about. Tonight they start off with Tim Scott out of South Carolina. And it's funny how they hardly have any people of color in his administration, but he's going to use a black man to start it off. Before we get on sports, I also want to mention to Republican National Convention that Kellyanne Conway is stepping away from Donald Trump's administration by the end of this month. I think she's been replaced by someone that's younger and prettier, and Katie Magdalene, and that's why she's stepping away. But it's all fair in love and war, and I just hope that justice will win out. That's the only thing that we can lean on. But hopefully in the next 3 months, or actually 2.5 months, we'll have a new administration that's voted into office, and people got to show up and vote. I do want to get on what people were talking about as another man was murdered by law enforcement. Doctors were saying that they play in the NBA and the NHL, but not the NFL or Major League Baseball. Now, the young man that was shot in the back by law enforcement in Wisconsin, he's dealing with doctors too. Now, we have nearly 150 doctors with expertise related to COVID-19, and the results are stark when you think about it, Big C. Roughly 90% of the 146 doctors who responded to the survey said they would definitely or probably play in the NBA, which has built a lockdown bubble in Orlando, or the NHL, which is also the bubble in Canada. But the majority said they probably or definitely would not play in the NFL, 62%, or Major League Baseball, 59%, under the current protocol, while officers gunned down an innocent man with his children in Wisconsin. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, what these doctors are talking about, the science, and you said the proper word, doctors. They understand the science. They understand social distancing. They understand wearing mask protection, Charlton. They understand using sanitizers, being safe in every capacity. This is what the bubbles have represented in the NBA and the NHL in Orlando and in Toronto and Edmonton, Canada, Charlton, is that they kept the players away from the public. They kept the players away from being in contact with people that they don't need to be in contact with. And we've seen the level of safety that this has created. This is what the CDC has preached about American society, that it needs to be quarantined, that it needs to be locked down to put the virus under wraps. And when you think about those two professional leagues that have put the virus under wraps, and you see what has happened in baseball with the number of canceled or delayed games because of the COVID-19 breakout. Every day it seems like there's another team with a COVID-19 breakout, and even the NFL in training camp, where they've come up with 77, they said, false negatives, tests in the NFL. Charlton, I believe all those tests are positive, and they're steadily positive. But the NFL cannot take that publicity to show that they got 77 positive cases amongst 11 teams after 1 week of training camp, because that will shut the NFL down. So they're going to do all that they can to take those players that had that positive test and quarantine them, Charlton, trying to protect this NFL season from potentially happening.
I thought about that too. How do you, I understand maybe 1 or 2 bad tests, but when you're dealing with medical doctors, they're not going to have 77 false reports. I want to say that Big C Sports, we want to be sexy. We want to be thrilling. We want to be engaging. We want to be thoughtful and clever. We really want to be provocative. If it feels good and you want some more of it, just Google it. And I really like talking about things that we cover. But I also mentioned the Republican National Convention tonight. I want to encourage Americans to vote. Text the word VOTE to 26797 and register. Tell all your friends. Tell them Big C and the NFL said vote now. Let's make this the biggest vote in the history of the universe. And when you go out and vote, remember, we just had a tragic shooting again by law enforcement in Wisconsin. And Donald Trump, who wants to be the president of everybody, he said, when you arrest them, rough them up. Now, when you go to the polls, remember that. Your president says when you arrest American citizens, rough them up. I want to go to something that happened in NBA basketball, because to me it's been so gripping. And I saw the sign, today I guess it was Kobe Bryant's birthday yesterday, and they're doing some type of celebrations this week. And that's all fine and dandy. But going forward, what I would really like to look at is Donovan Mitchell. He dropped 51 points, and I think Jamal Murray for Denver dropped 50 in the Utah and Denver series. So Utah's up 3-1 right now. And I mean, that's gripping basketball. Give me your thoughts. I don't think it's ever happened with 2 guys went for 50 plus in a playoff game, Big C. Your thoughts?
No, Charlton, this is the first time in history that has happened. 50 and 51 points, respectively, between those 2 players, Charlton. A gripping game. NBA, I mean, when you look at the action that has occurred in the bubble, it's almost like an all-star game.
Yeah.
Because you got players that are out there just freewheeling. When you look at the point production per game in the playoffs, in the bubble, they've exceeded what normally occurs in the regular season, Jonathan. There's been some hair-gripping games. And when you think about Murray, from Utah, I mean, Denver and what he's done, Charlton, 50 points in a game. I mean, he's been lighting it up in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, that's the most points that a Canadian player's ever scored in an NBA game. He's from Kitchener, Ontario, so, I mean, he's having fun being away from home. I mean, he'd probably like to be up there in that hockey bubble in Toronto, but, he's there in Orlando. But he scored 50 points, Charlton. That's the most that a Canadian player ever scored in a game, and he broke the record that was already set.
Yeah.
And he held part of that record along with Steve Nash, a fellow Canadian who used to play at the Phoenix Suns. They both had a previous high of 48 points. So, I mean, outstanding play in the bubble. Yeah, the Joker doesn't play defense. It's like Denver, they're up to, when it's a mile high, everybody else's lungs are burning. Now they're down in the bubble, and their lungs don't seem to be doing as well, even though they have AC. It's just a little bit different. They don't have that extra advantage. But just a dynamic game. Really love watching that game. Another game that I was really excited about is bang, bang, bang. Luka for three. He wins it for the Dallas Mavericks. Okay, whatever. His play-by-play call is better than mine. But the Mavericks, Luka Doncic, a historic triple-double, game winner. The kid's just old enough to drink a glass of beer, Big C. And what I saw was great basketball on both sides, but I really would have loved to see when the Clippers were up, I think 21 points in the second quarter. Dallas made a run back, and then Clippers came back, forced the game to overtime. I love watching Kawhi Leonard play, but I thought with about 4 seconds left in regulation, he pulled up for about a 20-foot jumper. I thought if he goes to the basket, he's going to get the basket or maybe at least the foul, and that would have kept him from going to overtime. I thought he would have gotten that call. And then people can say, well, there was a switch in overtime with about 3.5 seconds left. Only one player in the universe was going to get the shot off for Dallas. I know he had missed some three-point baskets. In fact, he airballed. But if you have that one shining moment, why would Kawhi Leonard not hold on to the jersey of Luka and say, if somebody beats us, it won't be you, Big C? Your thoughts? Well, Charlton, everybody on the floor, I think, during that game was an NBA player, NBA caliber player, NBA star potential player. So, I mean, you can't put all the onus on one guy in Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard, has not been the shutdown guy all year that people keep thinking that he is, Charlton. This is the guy that's had to deal with load management. He has knee problem and everything. And late in the game, especially in overtime, you got to realize that his knee is going to be bothering him.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that people don't take into account. You may have some of the best medical staff in the world, but if you have a chronic knee problem, Charlton, after you played into overtime, that knee is troubling you at that point in the game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you think about the shot that Doncic took, I mean, it was an outstanding shot to be able to knock it down from 30 feet out.
Yeah.
I don't care who's guarding you. If you're going to knock down a shot from 30 feet, you're knocking it down.
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard was not going to make the difference because everybody has this step-back rule in the NBA. So you get separation. So when you're allowed to take 2 steps backwards after terminating your dribble, I mean, you're going to need a 7'5" guy. Bovan would have had to come off the bench and block that shot.
Yeah. To me, this is what I love about NBA basketball, Big C. It's right in your face, and I'm getting used to not having the crowd. Of course, if we had the crowd, it'd be a lot more gripping. But you look at it in star comparisons, you have Luka averaging 31.5 points per game. Kawhi's averaging 33. Rebounds are both at about 10 and 10.5 for Luka. Assists, Luka's at 10 assists per game. Kawhi's at 5. Luka shoots 52% from the floor. Kawhi shooting 50. But that was basketball at its finest. I do want to ask you something about Montrezl Harrell. People say we don't want to talk about race. Well, I believe talking about race, I like mixing everything if it's real. But I love what Montrezl Harrell and Luka Doncic did when some words were exchanged. And I guess there was a term, sorry blank, white boy that was being told by Montrezl Harrell to Luka. And Luka says, stop flopping like a baby or whatever. Just lip reading. But what I saw is two men that did something wrong, said something foolish, And unlike men who are so full of ego, they will never say, I'm sorry, even if they know they're wrong. These two men embrace each other at half court, and they apologized, and they put it behind them. To me, that's what the world needs more of, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, ironically, Charlton, the world is not sport. And we had this conversation about having live mics on the floor during basketball games, at baseball games, football games, at hockey games, that the things that players say back and forth to each other, it's said in the heat of battle. Like I said, I'm still embarrassed for things I said 40 years ago to opponents when I was playing. So as I look at these things, Charlton, and what athletes do is not what normal people do. You start this off when you first started playing Little League. At the end of the game, everybody line up, go down the line, and high five.
High five, yeah.
But this is what sportsmanship is.
Yeah.
That's the difference between life and reality of sports. Reality of sports, Charlton, is sportsmanship. That it comes from the word of what the games are.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't see games that players don't go and congratulate and hug and thank each other after the game, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, or hockey. It's what you do.
Yeah.
It's the respect of a person that's in your profession.
Yep.
I mean, it's just like going to court, as you like to talk about a lot of times. You see lawyers grappling and going after each other, but they go out and have lunch.
Have a libation,
just
yeah.
like with the district attorney.
Yeah.
The judge, they go sit down and talk with each other.
Yeah.
When they're in the heat of the battle, they have to put on a display for everybody.
Yeah.
To keep your attention. So athletes will always do this.
Yeah, I used to like when coaches would even go by and shake each other's hand. Now they just throw a wave sign. So we have today the Bucks. I don't believe in giving out scores because people are recording things too. The Bucks.
I mean, you cover this sport called MMA. You got guys out there in brutal battles.
Oh yeah.
What do they do at the end of one of those matches?
Go
Even
see.
if they knock the opponent out,
They give a hug.
Check on them, don't
they go give a hug. Yeah. It's just sportsmanship, and that's what it is. It's about sportsmanship. It's nothing personal. I know they touched about it on a couple of programs all over the country, but I like when people can say, yeah, you know what, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, I apologize, you forgive me, and people can move on. Tonight, the Bucks are at the Magic, the Rockets versus the Thunder, the Pacers and Heat, and in the big game, it's about going up 3-1 or being tied at 2-2, the LA Lakers and the Portland Trail Blazers, and I want to see West Coast, but both teams on the West Coast, but I think if LA finds their groove, they'll find a way to win that. Before we come up on the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause, but do you agree with what happened? Philadelphia, they fired coach Brett Brown after being swept by Boston. We know they were knocked out last year in the playoffs by Kawhi Leonard and them good old boys in Toronto, and now they get knocked off by Boston. In fact, they get swept. Is that enough to fire the coach when people keep saying some of the athletes don't care as much? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, he's been there 7 years and he's never gotten past the Eastern Conference semifinals. I mean, you got to look at what you have in the depth and the salary cap on your roster.
Yeah.
And this is a business decision with Brett Brown.
Yeah.
You've been given an all-star caliber lineup and you haven't been able to mold it. And yet you've looked at teams that other people have considered lesser getting further than what you've had. They've had less of a payroll.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it gets to a time in the NBA that you got to move on. I mean, you said that several years ago with Mark Jackson.
Yeah.
Got fired at Golden State. Best record in the West, take teams to the playoffs,
yeah,
and you're out of there.
They let them go.
So, I mean, it comes down to management. They sit there and look at how much money they're paying. The return on investment is not looking at what they're paying out.
Yeah.
Somebody has to go. You can't get rid of 5 players, so you get rid of 1 coach.
I want to ask you before we come up on the Big C pause, and again, it's just your opinion. The bubble's a little bit different experience, Big C. If you got, let's say, we've seen it before, 5 seconds left, you're down by 1, you got a chance for James Harden, and you can put in your own guys. Who I want to shoot the ball, 5 seconds left, down by 1, I want James Harden. I want, believe it or not, I would even say Chris Paul. I know I might throw up on that, but as far as that, Damian Lillard, and if I pick the 4th guy, I would say Luka Doncic and Kawhi Leonard. Luka misses a lot of shots. He just made a big one. Who would you want the ball in the hands of? Down by 1, 5 seconds left, Big C. Your thoughts?
I'm going with those 2 guys that just came off a 50-point outing, Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
When you look at what they've done in the bubble, they've both been outstanding. I mean, when I look at Donovan Mitchell, He's the only player in the bubble that's had 2 50-point games in 1 week.
Yeah.
So you know you can count on Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, you can count on that. That's not bad. It's hard to go wrong, but when guys knocking down 50 like handshakes, gotta appreciate that. We'll take the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. There's so many apps all over the world that you can follow Big C Sports. I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. I want to jump down to the world of football just for a moment. I'm going to go back and forth with you, Big C, in the second half. SEC football on Friday, University of Vanderbilt. They had multiple positive COVID-19 tests and therefore had to cancel football practice on Friday as the NFL is boasting about false positives. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Charlton, this is inevitable. You know, we've talked about the breakouts in the southern states, and since the White House has taken over the reporting of positive COVID-19
they become negative, huh?
Charlton, they've gone down.
Yeah.
But you can't cover for these universities, Charlton, who have to report, and they're responsible for 100 players going out on a practice field.
Yeah.
He can't cover for these universities, Charlton, that are sending kids home that are having hundreds of cases on campus. You can keep saying that COVID-19 in America is going down, but the death rate is going up. So something is just not in correlation there, Charlton, as you want to keep hiding behind this, saying that, you know, that you're going to have a serum out before the Republican before the vote in November.
Yeah.
That you're going to have a vaccine out, Charlton. You ordered the FDA, Charlton, to start using plasma, which they have not had that approved by the CDC.
Yeah.
So you're forcing your hand trying to get people to think that you're on top of stuff, Charlton. There's been some reports, Charlton, from the CDC and other bodies that the death rate in America may be above 200,000. It's just not all being reported right now.
Yeah, and as you hear, if people, you know, the NFL just settled a big lawsuit. I guess they're still paying out on the concussion with Ben Amalu, and they said the NFL, the reason they lost the lawsuit and decided to settle is because they were what you call hide and seek. They were hiding the truth, Big C. And when you have 77 tests come back positive, and the NFL says, you know how much money's counting on us playing football? Oh, well, let's switch that box. And they say, oh, those tests were negative, actually. Don't believe what we first told you. And it's amazing. College football, with it looking like classes will be held online this fall all over this country, will college football make it through is the question. You can always start things, but then people stop them too. And you think about one of the biggest criticisms of big-time college athletics, Big C. This is before COVID-19. Players were isolated from the student body, tucked away in athletic facilities, spending more time on their sport than on their major, if they even had a major, Big C. And critics even use the word the bubble to describe the world in which they live, Big C. Your thoughts?
You know, it isn't ironic how many things that COVID-19 is exposing in America, Charlton,
Yeah.
that's been covered up for decades, and now you have no wall as a barrier to keep people away from seeing what you're doing. And, you know, we've talked about college athletics for a long time.
Yeah.
About players being exploited and not receiving proper compensation.
Yeah.
And everyone will say, well, they're getting a scholarship. Well, the value of that athlete to the university is generally between $500,000 and $650,000. So that's, you know, $40,000 scholarship that he may have received.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the value of it is more on the university side. But here it is, you know, the university is saying the safety of the student body is that we cannot have them on campus. So the universities are now, Charlton, not thinking of the athletes as students.
Yeah.
I mean, they're blatantly saying that. They say, okay, all the students go home
Yeah.
because it's unsafe. You guys that we make money off of, you're staying here and you're being tested.
Yeah, they let the horse out of the barn, Big C. It's all fair and love and war. College football, think about it, just 2 weeks before it's scheduled to begin this season, Louisiana Monroe just suspended all football activities due to, I think there was 9 positive COVID-19 tests within the programs, and Louisiana Monroe is scheduled to play its opening game on the road against Troy September 5th. Big C, your thoughts?
And Louisiana Monroe, Charlton, unfortunately, there was another tragic shooting of a young black man in the back by police officers in Monroe, Louisiana, in Lafayette, Louisiana on Friday. So we didn't get that on our show. So, I mean, these tragedies are going all over the place. It's not just in Wisconsin, it's in Louisiana also.
Yeah.
But you think about this. You got a COVID-19 breakout 2 weeks before your opening game.
Yeah.
So how can you safely say, and we know how hot Louisiana's been with COVID-19 over the past month.
And the storms
too. How can you safely say that you can keep the rest of the team safe, Charlton? How many players, if they're not pointing out the exact number of players, are these players going to travel to Troy University in Alabama? And we just talked about last week, remember, Auburn had 34 test positives. Troy, Alabama is not far from Auburn, Alabama, Charlton. So and they closed down a couple of the counties, that the high school districts down there that were playing football. They delayed their games.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're constantly putting our young athletes in harm's way for people to say, well, we got to get sports back so they don't concentrate so much on what's going on the news.
Yeah, it's amazing how the Ivy League, they shut down earlier than anyone, I believe, because they put more focus on a premium of life as opposed to the premium of how many dollars we can get from a TV network.
Well, look at the MEAC and the SWAC, those two black conferences, historical black conferences.
Yeah.
They shut it down also. They followed the lead of the Ivy League, saying, hey, our students are our students, not just athletes.
Yeah. And I'll bring it up too, because when people say Black Lives Matter, it matters in so many ways, especially when you look at a police officer walking into a white neighborhood and shooting a white father for walking back to his car, but they don't do that to white men. In, I think, the college football landscape, the black lives have less value to them, so they won't do what the predominantly white Ivy League will do. Pejoratively speaking, the HBCUs will. They've canceled football. Those are mostly all black administrators and presidents. But the other schools, they see black men as a commodity more than as a valuable life. But even with that said, I just want to throw this out there because I would love to see them put the whole thing on pause. Don't let someone pass away first. They had a story where a 21-year-old woman passed away from COVID after she had recovered. She passed away. She just got sicker, and 21 years old, a young mother. But college football, Associated Press preseason polls include 9 teams that are smart enough, I won't say smart enough, but at least the conferences are smart enough to say we're not going to put our young people in harm's way. You have Ohio State coming in number 2 based on who you're talking about, and then Penn State's number 7, number 9 is Oregon, number 12 is Wisconsin, number 16 is Michigan. Who's got it better than us? And coaches in Michigan are trying to fight science and say science is wrong. Can't we just do what the NFL did and just say all these positive tests were negative? You have number 17 USC, number 19 Minnesota, number 22 Utah, number 24 Iowa. Big C, this is really what the granddaddy of them all used to represent, the Big Ten versus the Pac-10 or now Pac-12 champion. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, to be realistic, think about this. You got the AP that's coming out with a poll, and you know that 9 of those teams in the top 25 are not playing. That lets you know the value of the rankings in the preseason in college football. They mean nothing.
No, they don't.
You got 9 teams that are not playing football, and yet they're ranked in the top 25. So what are you saying about those who potentially are playing? That they're not worth a dime?
Yeah.
So, I mean, how will they stay in the rankings if they're not playing? So after the first week of the season, or even by the end of September, if college football preseason kicks off and everybody else has victories, will those teams still be in the top 25? That lets you know how big a farce these polls are before you get to November.
Yeah, before you get there. And I also want to just make sure that at least we might be the only sports show that does it, Big C, but the National College Players Association is asking Congress to pursue broad-based reform in adopting compensation for student athletes. Would you believe it that, I mean, they're trying to get these bills signed into law to preempt any state-level compensation for student athletes, and that's important. But when I hear about these conferences, and even some of the parents saying they want to go beat up the presidents of these colleges because they're stopping them from playing football, there's a guy by the name of Ramogi Huma, and he's part of, a lot of guys are a part of it. But you don't hear any coach, and correct me if I'm wrong, no coach is talking about player compensation. They're only saying how we want to play, our boys really want to play because they want to win a championship. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is something that gravely needs a national platform when it talks about the compensation of players. I know 3 or 4 states have already passed laws that this will come in and act over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
But you have to have a unilateral law, Charlton, that protects all college athletes when it comes to compensation and how they're going to be compensated. You can't have it run state by state as we see now with these conferences by conferences electing to play and not play.
Yep.
This needs to be something that's governmentally regulated so that no player is getting screwed in the long term in this scenario, because it's going to happen. You can't leave it up to the states. You can't leave it up to the individual universities.
Yep.
It has to be a national law and have to have – this is what we talked about, having a commissioner in place.
Yeah.
A commissioner that's going to oversee it all, not Mark Emmert, but somebody who's knowledgeable. I know they hired Merton Hanks to bring him in.
But
there needs to be somebody, Charlton, like a GM from a professional football team who can come in and who understands the numbers.
Yeah. Well, college athletes' name, image, and likeness pay is the smoke that hovers above the raging fires like they're raging here in California, and some of the injustices at the core of NCAA sports. That's by Ramogi Huma, the association's executive director. I just hope that we don't lose that as people are talking about who's going to win and who's going to be a part of whatever. I mean, compensation is so important. It's more important for the athletes than it is for the coaches making several $1 million. I want to jump to the NFL and get your thoughts on something. The NFL, the Ravens, they fired 5-time Pro Bowl safety Earl Thomas, in essence for cause, after Friday altercation with Chuck Clark. Now, I've been around many pro sports teams. I've seen a fight almost every week. I've been around pro teams on the football iron, but they're saying they're going to use this to try to steal some money from them and let them go. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you got to look at the contract. We always talk about conduct. You know, that's cause for any professional organization, conduct. And they'll pull that line out of your contract anytime that you need, that they understand it. When they got Earl Thomas from Seattle last year, he wasn't the Earl Thomas that had been in Seattle, Charlton. He lost a step. And when you get to the point of where Earl was wanting to be disruptive on the team last year as well as this year, and then you're getting in fights with teammates in practice, you use the conduct detrimental to the team.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. It saves the team $10 million in this. They signed him to a 4-year, $40 million contract last year, Charlton.
Yeah.
Without him being on the roster this year, they saved $10 million on the salary cap.
Well, let me just, since you brought up about conduct that's detrimental. They'll cut a football player. But I want to go back to this law enforcement thing. I know in the Green Bay Packers, the leaders met with Jacob Blake about the Jacob Blake shooting, and Coach Matt LaFleur and the Players Leadership Council to discuss what the actions they thought could be taken. Like I was asking, what's the solution, Big C? We can all feel upset and disgusted, but there has to be a solution. And they were talking to these Green Bay Packers leadership players. What could they do after the police shooting, just about 155 miles away, Big C, from Lambeau Field? And, again, Jacob Blake, who's African-American, shot, I believe, 7 times by law enforcement officers in Wisconsin. And LaFleur said the social injustice, the police brutality, the antiquated laws just got to bring awareness to everybody that Black Lives Matters. We can't stand for this anymore. But I've always thought more than saying Black Lives Matter, the only thing that will change is when we're in the court of law. You don't always like the outcome, but it has to be adjudicated. And the biggest adjudication, I believe, should come on November 3rd, when President Donald Trump said, when you arrest them, rough them up. And many officers have been listening to that. It's not about Black Lives Matter, and I know they can't bring crimes against President Trump, but if any football player were to walk into a courtroom and tell somebody rough up the judge or rough up the district attorney, they would be arrested. We have a man that's in the Oval Office that just preceded what has been happening. Donald Trump gave the order, when you arrest them, rough them up, Big C. He said when people march, attack them with vicious dogs and ominous weapons. Okay, at some point in time, what can we do to get our white American leadership, because black people have been doing it ever since the Middle Passage, to shout down Donald Trump and his racism that I believe leads to a lot of this garbage, because they know they'll get a pat on the back. Big C, your thoughts?
What Donald Trump spoke, Charlton, was only law. He didn't speak anything that's not on the books. When you look at what LaFleur said with antiquated laws, Those laws were in place long before Donald Trump came along. He's not the boogeyman when it comes to that. He's just revving up George Wallace's ghost. That's all he's doing.
Yeah.
He woke up George Wallace's ghost. But these are antiquated laws that are on the book, Charlton, of how you can treat black people. And ironically, there was a football player 4 years ago that was saying the same thing that LaFleur just said over the weekend, Charlton, after the shooting in Kosh, Wisconsin. A guy named Colin Kaepernick took a knee calling for this. Everybody said he was against the military and the flag. You know, that was the excuse to say that Black Lives Matter. America voiced their thoughts, Charlton, that Black lives didn't matter 4 years ago when Colin Kaepernick took a knee. They said he's against the military and the police, that this Black Lives Matter thing is a farce. Just like Donald Trump says Black Lives Matter is a terrorist group. That is the thought of many Americans, Charlton, that Black lives don't matter because it does not raise up the hair on the back of a lot of people's necks, Charlton. They're always coming up with an excuse. Can't rush the judgment. He's had to do something. We haven't seen all the videos. We don't have the full story. Don't believe what you see by the cops shooting this guy 7 times in the back, holding him by the shirt, shooting him in the back with his 3 young boys in the car. Don't believe that.
Yeah, I think Coach Greg Popovich for the San Antonio Spurs, and I know you say maybe you don't agree with what I'm saying, but I say that athletes do carry a platform that will get people who don't maybe pay attention to politics to say, wait a minute, if Coach said it, or if LeBron James said it, or Tom Brady said it, then maybe they'll pay attention also, and when they go to the polls, remember when Trump said rough them up, he wasn't saying rough up little white kids when you arrest them. That's a similar story too. Cincinnati Bengals defensive end Carlos Dunlap, he details some off-season discrimination, and he recalls an instance that happened in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and there's some things that happened also that he was talking about between black and white players, Big C. The black ones were admonished, and the white guys, it was kind of like, hey, it's just the what boys do, Big C. Your thoughts?
And also that sent the black players out of the facility, Charlton, was white. Told the black players that they could not work out.
Yeah.
But the white players, it was okay. So it's a black and white thing. I mean, and as much as you want to say all white people are not bad, I'm not saying that they are.
Yeah.
And they recognize the ones that are not, Charlton. But when you have those representing the masses and others are not speaking out against them, then you're kind of complicit to what's going on because it does not affect your yard, Charlton. It's just like when your neighbor's dog comes over and poops in your yard. Well, he didn't poop in mine, he poops in yours. You're not offended.
Yeah.
You know, and this is the same type of scenario. You can take it any direction that you want.
Yeah.
But if you're complicit into somebody being bad towards somebody else, then you have to be looked at in the same light.
Yeah. I love the discussions because it's the only way that things will get better. And we got to keep discussing things. If not, it just won't get better. There was 5, and I would love to see some of these 5 new NFL head coaches. You know, we talked about the administration and POTUS's involvement with sports, and some people, dumb guys say, well, let's not mix politics and sports, because if you're dumb, you can't do it. And I understand that, but we're not for dumb people. But I would love to see these 5 new head coaches: Mike McCarthy, Dallas Cowboys; Matt Rule, Carolina Panthers; Ron Rivera, who, God bless him, he's going through his own health issues with the Washington football teams; Kevin Stefanski's Cleveland Browns; Joe Judge, New York Giants. You know, it's about sinking or swimming for those guys. But I would hope that they would grab on and hold hands like Reggie White used to have players get together and pray when he played for the Green Bay Packers, the late Reggie White. I would hope that they would hold hands with the Green Bay Packer leadership and say how we can put out a positive message, all athletes and all coaches, about what just happened in Wisconsin so they can end it. Don't be silent anymore, Big C. Your thoughts?
But Charlton, why is the pressure always put on the workers, the ones who don't make the decisions in the business? What's wrong with the business owners, the CEOs who have the biggest mouth in all of sports and all of television? Jerry Jones could find a microphone in a snowstorm if it was white.
Yeah.
Prior to this coming out with the George Floyd murder, we have not heard from Jerry Jones. He's been quiet, and now we've had multiple murders again, Charlton, and Jerry Jones is still quiet. We've had the NFL players talking about Black Lives Matter, and they're going to kneel for the national anthem. Jerry Jones has still been quiet.
Yeah.
Why do we keep putting the pressure on the athletes instead of the owners? The owners, just like Earl Thomas. It wasn't the players who cut Earl Thomas.
Yeah.
It was the owner that facilitated that. Y'all said it's okay. So they got rid of Earl Thomas. Saved me $10 million.
Yeah.
It wasn't the players, Charlton. So the players don't make the critical decisions in any sports organization. It comes down to the owners. So when are the owners going to be the advocates for Black Lives Matter in America? Because majority of their employees are black.
Because people don't know the owners and athletes have a face, and it's the athlete that's on the cereal box. And
They know the owners, Charlton. They know the owners.
No, the average
NFL,
American does not know the owners.
I guarantee you 25 of the owners, if they walked across the stage in the NFL, Charlton, if all 32 walked across, 25 of them would be recognized by the average sports fan.
I disagree.
And if you're a sports fan and you love sports, you know at least 30 of the owners in the NFL.
No, I disagree. People don't even know the city council member. They don't know the owners of these teams, but they know every player, especially every quarterback or running back or wide receiver. They know those guys. They know the defensive lineman players a lot more than the owners. But why not have everybody put their heads together? That's what I think. The more, the merrier is what I've always thought. Before we come up on the close, when our show goes by way too fast, the NFL quarterback competition, when you think about New England, it seems to be on the ropes as Cam Newton is really starting to separate himself from the pack. He's like the guys that do everything. I think Gronkowski, they take some time off, whether it's injury or retirement, and when they come back, they seem a little bit fresher. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Cam Newton, everybody knew when Cam Newton was signed in New England that here's a guy who's a former All-Pro, former MVP of the league, Charlton, has set many records, as far as quarterbacks go. All he needed to do was be healthy. If you talk to anybody in Carolina, everybody said Cam gave you 100% every week. They knew he was hurt every week, but he still gave you 100% of what he had left. Going into New England with Jarrett Stidham, a guy who's really had no NFL experience, and Gronkowski, who was a career backup, Charlton. So when you look at those guys in New England, how could you say any of those guys were equal to Cam Newton?
You can't. Just look at their accomplishments. I think Cam's thrown for over 4,000 yards every year except for 2. And not a lot of people can say that. I want to stick to the same AFC East. The Miami Dolphins, they're saying, even with Florida being a high hit area with COVID-19, now they have the hurricanes coming through the South and Louisiana and down in Florida, and I hope that people can just stay safe and heed the warnings. But they're saying, and I think it's risky, they're saying they will allow up to 13,000 fans, if football goes through, to socially distance and attend the home opener against the Buffalo Bills, I believe, right around September 20th, Big C. Is that foolish, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, there's been 10 teams that said they're going to allow at least 20,000 fans in their stadium. I think all of us as a parent has told our children, do not touch the fire on the stove because it will burn you.
Yep.
And so, either that child listened to you or that child didn't, as far as their safety was concerned. That's what you have to look at as these adults, Charlton. Are you foolish or you're not? You either listen to the CDC or you turn on your TV and watch the game, or you go there and you take the chance of potentially getting COVID-19. They just had the Sturgis motorcycle rally, Charlton, a couple of weeks ago out in South Dakota.
Yeah.
There's been, thus far, 26 cases of COVID-19 traced back to this motorcycle rally in South Dakota, where people refuse to wear masks and social distance.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to my son and my daughter over the weekend about some things, just having some heart-to-heart conversations about things going forward in life. And as I always say, you can only try to give the best example you can. Not everybody's going to believe that example, but listening is important. And I really appreciate, my son and my daughter talking to me about just things that's on their mind. And my daughter said something that's really poignant to me. She talked about the age difference. As adults wanted kids to make the best choices, and kids make mistakes. And as she said, sometimes you got to look at a parent being 2 to 3 times the age of a child, yet that child understands the parents can make mistakes, the kids can make mistakes, but conversation is always more important, and I really appreciate what young people are doing with conversation. Before we close out, I want to touch on Major League Baseball. I know Mookie Betts and them good old boys for the Dodgers, they put a beat down on the Colorado Rockies, Big C. He hit 2 home runs, and the Dodgers blasted the Colorado Rockies. And the Dodgers are going to be taking on the streaking Giants. They're going to be playing again soon. And so baseball, when you think about Mookie Betts, he's been doing his thing with the bat. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the Dodgers are doing okay, but Mookie Betts needs to make a call to Chicago to Jose Abreu, Charlton, for the Chicago White Sox over the weekend in a 3-game series. He hit 6 home runs, tying a major league record.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the balls are flying out of the park all over the place. Maybe there's not enough, compression in the stadium from having bodies in the seats, and the air is a lot lighter.
Yeah, it's a lot lighter. I want to go to the Northern Trust in the world of golf this weekend, because every now and then somebody gets into the swing of things. They get into a groove. Dustin Johnson, he won big at the Northern Trust in the Boston area, the largest margin of winning since 2006. And when you think about, I was asking you just last week, is the golf ball juiced, or is the players that are juiced? Well, somebody's juicing when you can win. I think he had one of the biggest winning margins in the history of golf. I think he had 30 under, shot 254 over the first 4 rounds, and he won by 11 strokes. Big C, your thoughts?
I mean, you think about going 30 under. I'd hope to go 30 under over the year. So he did that in one tournament over the weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, but an outstanding job by Dustin Johnson. But you got to feel, something for the guy who came in second.
Yeah.
You shoot 19 under, and you're in distant second. You lose by 11 strokes.
Yeah.
The guy who shot 19 under may never shoot 19 under again in his career.
Yeah.
I don't ever expect Dustin to do 30. But you shoot 19 under and you can't win a tournament.
Yeah.
You got to go home and find a bottle sitting somewhere on the shelf.
Yeah, he's going to go find a ball sitting somewhere on the shelf. It's Harris English is the guy that came in second by 11 strokes. A lot of guys had a good tournament. Even Tiger Woods shot well on Sunday. He shot 66 on Sunday, which was the lowest round for Tiger Woods since a lot of things have happened in this crazy COVID world. Even in the world of, speaking of crazy, back in the world of baseball, Big C, Mike Trout, Major League Baseball, Mike Trout, his rookie card, it got, I think it was autographed. It sold for $3.93 million on Saturday. That's the highest priced trading card in history, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Honus Wagner had the previous highest priced card in history, Charlton, $3.12 million back in 2006.
Yeah.
That Honus Wagner's card sold for. And ironically, Wayne Gretzky owns that card, Charlton, Dustin Johnson's father-in-law. So, I mean, when you think about sports, it's a cycle, a continuum of a circle.
Yeah.
But Mike Trout, being the highest paid player in baseball, having the highest rated card in the history of baseball, Charlton, I mean, and he had his first son this year.
Yeah.
It's been a marvelous year for Mike Trout.
Yeah, it really has. And I just hope that everybody can stay safe with everything that's going on in the world of sports. I'm going to tell you, as we love doing things with Big C Sports, we want to be the new sexy. We want to be clever. We want to be engaging. We want to be bold. We want to be thrilling. We want to be funny. We want to be thoughtful. We want to be provocative. It's willing to be real sports talk. If you're doing something and it feels good and you want some more, just Google it. I never want to be a sports show that is absent-minded of talking about things that really affect what's going on in our society. And I know a lot of people have been dealing with the fires in Northern California, dealing with the floods and the thunderstorms that are happening down in the South. I really hope that people can heed the warnings and make sure they're keeping their families safe. Not too many times. I know out here, Big C, I heard some people that were dealing with the fires in Northern California, and as we were trying to get sports back, even the 49ers, they're dealing with air pollution issues and how do they practice. So many people try to stay back and put the fire out around their own homes, and when the fire departments come through to try to save or rescue people or put out fires, they have to let the fires burn so they can go rescue people. How important is it to heed the warnings, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I mean, it's just human nature to protect what you've worked so hard for.
Yeah.
But you have to understand, everyone doesn't have insurance. As much as you want to think about it, they're trying to realize all they're going to have is what they can take out of there. But you're never going to get anything out if you don't have your life. And that's the one thing American citizens should always worry about.
Yeah.
Taking care of your life first. Physical things can be replaced sometimes.
Yeah.
Not everything. But your life can never be replaced. As we look at the 177,000 Americans that we've lost to COVID-19, none of those lives can be replaced. None of those families can ever be whole again. But they didn't have a choice in that matter, Charlton. But you have a choice when you have to heed the warning from your state and local fire departments and social services.
Yeah.
Leave the area, Charlton. That's what you have to do.
You got to do that. Even the Angels in the Astros series is altered ahead of Tropical Storm Laura. I hope that people can stay safe all over this great country. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Johnson, what I look at in the sports universe frightens me in the sports universe, that these universities are taking chances on all these young athletes' lives, saying that the game must go on. But life is more precious than that, and they should consider the CDC and heed their warning and think about playing football at a later time. I also want to thank our first responders, Johnson, nurses, doctors, first responders, for the marvelous job that you do every day. Even though we've lost 177,000 Americans, you have never given up on your job any day. Stay strong.
You've never given up. Stay strong. Life is precious, and you are precious every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide. Follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America, and Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, that's never, ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and ask for help, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to deal with that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports Show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.